I listened very carefully to President Trump's speech today. First of all, it was fantastic. His substance on the economy and on the border. He has a charisma. He's got a jocularity that is really just terrific. And, of course, he's spot on. And I was making a list of his economic policies, many of which we already know because he's been talking about it for some time, unlike Harris. And I want to be honest with you, America. It reminds me of Ronald Reagan's tax cuts. We had the greatest economic growth since the Industrial Revolution under Reagan, and since Reagan, the greatest economic growth under Donald Trump. What Trump is proposing is not radical, despite what the media say today, and I want you to understand that the media used to call the Reagan economic program Reaganomics. Remember all that? Some of you do, some of you don't. And we had an explosion of economic growth. The economy literally grew over an 8-year period. The economy, the American economy, over 30%. Over 30%. We'd never seen so much prosperity. And but for the pandemic, the same with Trump. And when we were coming out of the pandemic, we saw an explosion of growth, low inflation, 1.4%. Imagine that. And then the Democrats step in with trillions of dollars in spending. So let's discuss this rationally with a little bit of historical context. Number one, the Democrats will never cut spending. The only spending they cut is when it comes to the United States military and Veterans Affairs. Also when it comes to the border. Otherwise, they will not cut spending. Massive redistribution of wealth. Massive, phony, radical left-wing programs that enrich their oligarchs and enrich their left-wing organizations. And so you have this Green New Deal, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, trillions of dollars, hundreds of billions, we don't even know where they went, over $40 billion to hook up the internet all over the country, including people who don't have it. So far, they've hooked up nobody. $7 to $8 billion for electric vehicle charging stations, of which they built 8. They're never going to stop spending, and I'll tell you why. Unfortunately, it's now built into the system since Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. That is, the Senate Democrats are never going to go along with cutting spending, except in those areas I already mentioned. And so you need 60 votes. You need 60 votes to pass a budget if they choose to filibuster it. You get budgets that come out of the House of Representatives where they're cutting spending, and then Schumer blocks them. And so there's not a lot we can do about it. And so when I hear these economists, many of our friends on Fox, on other networks and so forth, say, well, the Republicans and the Democrats, none of them want to cut spending, that's simply a lie. We have House Republicans who are constantly trying to cut spending, some more than others. And it is killed in the United States Senate by the Democrats. And by the way, it only takes 40-some-odd Democrats to kill it. And they have a simple majority right now that kills it. So they're not going to cut spending. And this, by the way, is going to one day crash our economy. But that's not the point I want to address. Trump is talking about slashing the capital gains tax. Ronald Reagan did that. Trump is talking about slashing taxes across the board, including the top level, middle, and lower. Ronald Reagan did that too. Trump is talking about companies in America who invest in heavy equipment because it's very expensive, that they'll be able to amortize it within 1 year. Reagan did the same thing. These are very, very important policies that will build up our industries, that will build up manufacturing, that will strengthen our industrial base, that will strengthen our economy, and create tremendous, well-paying American jobs right here. That is what Trump is doing. This pinprick stuff that Kamala Harris talks about, well, if this company does this, if this company does that, it never works, and they don't do it anyway. She's talking about a massive increase in the capital gains tax. You know what's going to happen if there's a massive increase in the capital gains tax? Companies are going overseas. They're either going to move their headquarters overseas, but they're certainly going to move their manufacturing overseas. So think about that. Under Kamala Harris economy, more jobs are moved overseas and more illegal aliens come into the country and take jobs that exist. This is crazy. This is crazy. So when you have open borders, when you're not deporting anybody, when you're flying into the country 1 million illegal aliens, and by flying them into the country, certifying them as legal aliens on a pathway to citizenship, that's what they're doing. It is so diabolical. Undermining American workers, undermining American wages. You're destroying the ability to assimilate cultures and other populations of diverse backgrounds all over the world into our own culture. That's what's going on in Springfield, Ohio, despite all the lies and from the left and all the propaganda. That's what's going on in every city in America. That's what's going on in Chicago. And by the way, in hour 3, we're going to have our man Lee Zeldin on the program to talk about what's happening with Venezuelan gangs in New York. And it's not just New York. It's Chicago, too. Chicago has a massive gang problem. Domestic gangs now facing off against Venezuelan gangs, for God's sakes. We didn't have this problem 4 years ago. We didn't have it in Chicago. We didn't have it in New York. We didn't have it in Philadelphia or L.A., and we have it now. And now she's going to take a trip to the border, and we're all supposed to get excited because she might burp up a couple of rehearsed phrases? Come on, America. Either we save our country or it's not going to be saved. Now, what about tariffs? Trump is not a tariff king. He doesn't put tariffs on everything. Ronald Reagan was more free market than not. And he used to boast about this. I remember I worked in his campaigns and I served in his administration for 8 years. But Reagan put tariffs on goods, electronics, coming from Japan. They were destroying our television industry, and they pretty much wound up doing that, our electronics industry and so forth. There had been negotiations and negotiations, but they wouldn't budge. So he placed the most onerous tariffs imaginable on many of these Japanese electronic products to try and save our electronics industry. Trump is saying the same thing, that the communist Chinese are destroying our farmlands. We now literally have a negative balance of trade when it comes to farm products. We've never had a negative balance of trade when it's come to farm products. And so what Trump is saying is we got to save our agricultural communities. What's Biden doing? Nothing. Zero. Busy subsidizing illegal aliens. Trump is a common sense guy. He's more conservative than most Republicans who've served in the Oval Office. He's telling the industries that are building auto plants south of the border, you don't get to build auto plants in Mexico and then ship them 20 miles into Texas, into Arizona, into New Mexico, and so forth, ripping us off like this, destroying American workforce, American industry by playing a game, by playing a system. You don't get to do that. And so he says, no. What has Biden and Harris done about it? Nothing. Zero. This electric vehicle stuff on top of the open borders, on top of taxes that will send American business and jobs overseas, on top of illegal aliens taking American jobs that exist in this country and driving down wages. This isn't a market system. This is a government run amok. A government industrial policy that Biden and Harris are running, that the Democrats are running, that are destroying our industrial center, our manufacturing, blue-collar jobs and white-collar jobs, now and in the future. And with their spending, with inflation that's going to continue to go through the roof, there are respites, of course, with interest rates and inflation, because monetary policy set by the Fed, they jump in, okay, we're going to cut half a point. Okay, so there's a sudden decrease in interest rates. That's not going to last. It can't last. You can't have $36 trillion on record debt, off record debt when you include entitlement programs of $300 trillion in an economy that creates approximately $17.5 to $18 trillion in wealth every year. It's unsustainable. But you don't kill the golden goose that lays the golden eggs either. You've got to grow. You've got to create prosperity. The American people need to live. They need to survive. And despite all this spending, I know this is a lot to digest, but 3 hours is all I have. They're slashing the military budget. Do you know Kamala Harris has not voted as a senator once for the military budget? Do you know she never voted for an increase in the salaries of any military personnel? Are you aware of this? I don't know why the Trump campaign or the RNC or somebody's not talking about it, so I'll talk about it. I am telling you that Kamala Harris never voted for a salary increase for a single man or woman in uniform, in any uniform in our military services. Not once. Voted against it every single time. But she voted for more money for the bureaucracy. She voted for more money for illegal immigrants. She voted for more money, you name it. She voted money, 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 money. Comes to the military? No. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not our values. This is not our belief system. They are literally destroying our finances, gutting our economy, opening our borders to change the entire nature of the country. This is what they're doing. Now, one other thing. I know it's a lot. It's okay. We got a lot to do today. She's going to go to the border. They say, oh, how exciting. Who gives a crap? She finally comes out of the closet. Oh, there's Kamala. As I've been saying now for months, she's playing rope-a-dope. Oh, and she'll say something that doesn't mean anything. It'll either be a flat-out lie or puffery. Listen, they keep talking about this phony bipartisan bill. I want you to listen to me carefully. I reposted this. It's very important. Very, very important. Kamala Harris says she would sign the so-called bipartisan immigration bill. It's good to know. It's good to know. Here are 6 reasons, just 6 that I came up with out of 300 and some pages in this bill. The bill, number 1, was never bipartisan. It was negotiated in secret, and upon its release was immediately rejected by the overwhelming majority of Republican senators once they read it. Not a single House Republican supported it. So how is this bipartisan? Number 2, the bill would make catch and release. You catch somebody in the United States, they manage to get here, and you release them into the United States. The law of the land, part of our federal immigration code, making stay in Mexico, which Trump wants to put back in place, impossible. Because you would have to undo the statute. And what did I just say? The Senate Democrats would never allow that, and they don't need a majority to stop it. So catch and release would be federalized as a part of federal law. Stay in Mexico would become impossible. That's number 2. Number 3, the bill would require work permits for illegal aliens. Work permits for illegal aliens, they're supposed to be deported. No. They would get work permits as a matter of federal law. Number 4, the bill would require the provision of taxpayer-funded lawyers for illegal aliens. 20 million illegal aliens, every one of them would have a right to a taxpayer-funded lawyer to gum up the works and make enforcing the border and deportation impossible. That's in the so-called bipartisan bill. Up to 5,000 illegal aliens a day would be permitted. That's almost 2 million illegal aliens a year, not even including the gotaways. And the bill would require payment of billions of dollars to sanctuary cities and pro-illegal alien non-governmental organizations. What do you think, folks? She said she would sign that bill on day 1. That's the phony bipartisan bill.